One of the biggest questions that we have to consider as composers and arrangers, especially if we're doing this as a career, as a job, is how much should I actually be charging for my services? Maybe you're writing music for someone else, or you're orchestrating one of their pieces, or let's say you're writing for a film or video game. It's really important to know sort of like the ballpark range of where you want to be. So in this video, I want to share with you my personal experience, how much I personally charge, the way I think about pricing, and give you some actionable advice that you can take on immediately after watching this video. So first of all, let's talk about the concept of how you can charge. There's charging by the hour for the project, and then there's also charging for minutes of completed music. That's also a very popular one, I would say, in film and video games. And then there's also charging a flat rate for the project. So each one has its own pros and cons, right? So charging by the hour is interesting because it keeps both parties sort of accountable. For the composer, it's good because you can keep track of your own time and bill as many hours as you're working. You sort of respect your own time, and the client also respects the amount of time that you're putting into the project as well. But the downside to that is that the client may worry about you potentially dragging on the project just because you want to earn a few extra bucks. And of course, that's not really a headspace you want your clients to be in. So I personally don't really charge by the hour when it comes to doing orchestral arrangements or, one-off projects. Charging per minute of music, though, is a pretty common industry standard, again, for film and video games, and going anywhere between, let's say, $100 to $300 a minute is pretty typical, I would say. For recent projects I've done, I've charged $250 per minute of completed music. So that basically includes the composition, the completed orchestration. And it's good because, like, if let's say you have 1 minute of music, then you only get that certain amount of money. But let's say you wrote 50 minutes of music, well, then it's 250 times 50, right? Or whatever, however much music you wrote for that project. So I would personally go with that approach instead of charging hourly. But if you had to charge hourly, I would say anywhere between 50 and $100 to start would be pretty good. But again, for charging per hour, I think that's better for beginner projects. Like if you're just getting started out and you're not really sure how long it would take you, you probably want some experience under your belt in the first place. But just to be sure, you also want to respect your own time. So again, I think between 50 and $100 an hour is a pretty good place to start. The third approach would be charging a flat rate for the entire project. And for me, this is the approach I personally like to do. The way I think about it is if I have a project and I anticipate it will take me, let's say, X amount of hours, let's say 10 hours, I will bill for 10 hours plus a little bit more because I know that I will most likely have to do revisions, and there will be things that we'll have to tweak here and there that the client might not necessarily be happy with on the first go. One of the biggest pros to this is that if you charge a higher amount, yes, it might scare the client off, but you never really know until you actually pitch that price range, right? Let's say I want to charge $500 for a project, but I ask for $750. Well, if they say, oh, it's a little too high for us, it's outside of our budget, do you have any room to negotiate? Then you can say yes. You can lower it back down to, let's say, the 500 or even lower if you really need to. But if they say yes to that 750, well, that feels amazing because now you just made an extra 250, right? So charging a higher amount also helps the client respect you more for your work. If you only charge, let's say, $50 for a project, then let's say they worked with you and they didn't like it, well, they could always leave because they're only out $50 if they already paid you. But if you're charging, let's say, $1,000 for a project and they paid you that $1,000, well, not only are they going to expect a great result, but they're going to respect the time you're putting into it because you're probably commanding a higher price range due to the experience and the work that you've already done in the past. So this is my preferred method of charging. I like to charge by the project. And when I started out like around $250, $300 a project doing arrangements for other people's music. But nowadays I charge between $1,500 to $2,000 per project, depending on the scope, of course. The less detailed ones where they only need a few tracks, maybe I'll start at $1,000, but the ones that have full-fleshed arrangements, usually around $2,000 and up. But as a general price range, I would recommend between, let's say, $500 to $1,500 for most projects that require virtual instruments. But again, there's no right or wrong here, right? Like if you're just starting in the industry, you want to build up your portfolio of work, there is something to be said for working for free. I would actually recommend it, like to build those connections. You can find maybe directors or people who are working in the industry that you do want to work with and actually offer to do a gig for free. So you can say like, I'm building my portfolio. I would love to score your project in exchange for building my portfolio. Would you be up for that? And so they have some respect for you because they know that you're starting from scratch, but you also want to use it for your portfolio. And in most cases, they'd be honored to have you as one of their first projects. But as you become more experienced, you have more projects in the bag, I would definitely recommend increasing your price a little bit each time you do a new project, just so you can see how far you can stretch it before the rubber band breaks and the requests for your work start going down. So that's where you can pull it back a little bit and sort of find that sweet spot for your clients. So if I had to sum it all up, I would basically recommend to charge reasonably high, not an extremely high number where obviously no one can reach, but you want to charge an amount that you think you're worth, plus a little bit more just in case they do say yes. And of course, always be willing to negotiate if they decline that rate, find a sweet spot that works for both of you. I found that served me really well throughout my career so far, and it makes me more happy and excited to work on those projects because I know I'm being compensated fairly for it. And I'll also put in my 100% effort knowing that the project is actually something I want to work on as well. If you have any questions about pricing, please do let me know down in the comments below. Maybe you can also share, if you're willing to, how much you personally charge for your projects at the moment. And are you going to think about potentially raising those prices a little bit to give yourself a little bit more respect, but also have your clients respect you more at the same time. If you do want to learn more about one of my favorite ways to earn an income as a creative, I actually put together a guide a few years ago going over the exact process I'm using to monetize my passions from scratch and do what I love and monetize at the same time. So you can click the first link down in the description box below. It's completely free and it's a guide that is super condensed and will show you step by step literally what I do to monetize my passions on a daily basis. Now, if you are serious about getting into scoring as a full-time career, you definitely want to check out this video right here. I share my complete thoughts on whether it's a good fit for you or not, the pros and cons of going into the industry full-time, what you can expect, and my own experience as a composer. So it's super valuable. A lot of my students have found it helpful, and I know it will serve you well as well. So I'll see you in that video, and I'd love to hear your thoughts there.